والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Inshallah, everyone is doing well. Welcome to another one of our Mizan live sessions. As you all know, we will be continuing with the topic of the rulings of Salat, or the conditions of Salat, I should say. And Alhamdulillah, we've made quite a bit of progress up until now. So we started at the very beginning. I think the first condition that we discussed was the condition of timing and the timings of prayer. And Alhamdulillah, after that we moved on to Qibla, and then we moved on to the clothing of someone who was praying. And now we've come to basically the end of the clothing, and also moving on to the place in which someone prays, and what conditions have to be taken into consideration when we're talking about the place that someone is praying in. So Alhamdulillah, I think we have some good pointers to go through today. These are, when I say good pointers, I mean in the sense that these are questions that people have quite often actually, and they're rulings that people actually deal with on a day-to-day basis. Because, you know, there's a lot of rulings that we have. Some of them we deal with probably less. Some of them, though, we deal with probably every other day, or maybe a little less than that. But basically, these are rulings that we actually deal with. So just a couple pointers. I'm going to mention these as we do at the beginning of each and every session. And after that, we will get right into our topic. So like always, feel free to leave any questions or comments that you have at the bottom. You can also mention any topics that you would like us to sort of explore other than what we're discussing right now. It could be with regards to the rulings of ahkam, basically fiqh of other sections, if that's what you have in mind, or it could be other topics as well. And also, of course, any questions or comments you have with regards to the content that we're going through. If you are watching this after the session is over, it'll be a lot easier if you sent in a direct message on Facebook to Mizan Institute, and we can get to your question in that way a lot better. Don't leave it in the comment section of the video, because usually it gets a little messy after with some of the settings basically that Facebook has. When you do send in a question, whether it's through the comments or after the session is done, please do mention who you follow, so that we can inshallah be better prepared to answer the questions. And as I always mention, if you have a piece of paper and a pen or something that you can take a note with, a tablet or iPad, whatever the case may be, please do take notes, because the content that we're going through, if you take notes of it right now, it will remain with you as time passes by. And it'll be a lot easier to come back to it later on with you when you deal with a specific situation that you are dealing with. So like always, I'm gonna do a quick review of what we have discussed up until now. Not all the sessions, basically the last session that we had. And afterwards, I will move on to the topic that we have prepared, inshallah, for today. Let me just pull up the page so that I can see, inshallah, the comments that the brothers and sisters might be leaving. Okay, perfect. Assalamu alaikum to everyone who has joined us. Very nice to have you guys with us. So quick review of what we talked about last week. Basically, we were finishing up the conditions of clothing. We said that the conditions of clothing for someone who's going to pray, there is roughly 6 different conditions that we have to keep in mind. 2 of these conditions, of course, were conditions that were there specifically when it came to a brother who is basically offering his salat. And then the other 4 are regardless of the gender. So the first one we talked about, and we had a full session about this one, was the taharat of the clothing. We explained about situations where you have a doubt, where later on you find out it was najis, and the different scenarios that came up there. We also had a specific session, or another session, on times where you actually realize that your clothing is najis, but it's okay for you to pray with that clothing that is najis. The exceptions that we had in those situations. So we also discussed those situations as well, basically the exceptions. And from what I remember, there was 4 or 5 exceptions in that regard. So that was condition number 1. Then we moved on to condition number 2, and that was that your clothing has to be mubah. Now, between Ayatollah Khamenei and Ayatollah Sistani, Ayatollah Sistani has this as ihtiyat wajib, Ayatollah Khamenei has it as a fatwa. Slight difference of opinion there. But we said basically the only ruling that really comes up here is that what do you do if you're praying with clothing that you have not paid khums on? Because when we talk about ghasbi clothing, it's very rare for us to end up praying with someone else's clothing, something that we don't really deal with as practicing Muslims. So, but the idea of not paying khums, for whatever reason, maybe someone doesn't know about it, maybe, you know, that type of a thing. Or God forbid, some of us might even not, you know, it might be a shortcoming where we just disregard this duty that we have. There was a question as to whether it is going to affect our prayers. So we discussed this, and we said that technically, I just want to give you a brief answer because this is just a review of last week, so I'm not going to go through all of the details that we covered last week. Technically, 99% of the time, no, it's not going to create a problem with regards to your namaz. It is still haram for you to pray with that clothing, because when we say a clothing is khums needs to be paid on it, that means 1/5 of it is not yours. That means 1/5 of it is basically the imam's, and he has, you know, he has authority over it, right, between the imam and the sadat basically. So it's still haram for you to pray with that clothing. However, it will not make your salat batil. So there is one specific situation, but I won't go through it. We discussed it in the previous week. You guys can look that up. And as you, I don't know if you guys saw in the Alhamdulillah, we have our own YouTube channel now. So whatever basically content that is being produced right now with Mizan Live, after having it streamed live on Facebook, it's always uploaded to YouTube, and that opens our hands up a little bit, just because the quality that YouTube allows is a little bit better than the quality that Facebook allows when it's being streamed live. So anyways, everything that is being done is being uploaded over there as well. So if anyone wants, they can watch it over there. Technically, this will not be a problem for us. Moving on, that's condition number 2. Condition number 3 is that no part of our clothing should be from mayta. Okay. Now, when we say mayta, we're talking about, at least in this particular situation, we're talking about a halal animal that was not slaughtered properly, right? So like a cow, a sheep, right? They were not slaughtered properly. And in these situations where they were not slaughtered properly, the body of that animal is considered mayta and therefore najis. Okay, so we said that no part of the body of this animal should be part of your clothing, and there were some slight details about whether it only refers to animals that have gushing blood, or no, it refers even also, I should say, to animals that don't have gushing blood. There's a difference of opinion there. I'm not going to go into that too much. But the important thing to remember is that this ruling applies when we are talking about mayta, and we are talking about parts of the body of that animal that basically have sense, right? So the fur of a sheep that is not slaughtered properly, that's no problem. If I have a coat made of that, for example, right, that's not going to be a problem. Because that's not a part of the body that has sense, right? Or basically it's not as alive technically, although it might be. But so that's the ruling there. Then we said there's a 4th condition. This 4th condition is a separate thing. This 4th condition has nothing to do with halal animals. It has to do with haram animals, right? Because we also have animals that are just technically haram for you to have. Doesn't matter how you slaughter them. Amongst those animals are animals that are predators, right? Animals that prey on other animals, basically. So Ayatollah Khamenei and Ayatollah Sistani, they both agree on this part of it, that if you have an animal that is a predator, you are not allowed to have anything from the body of that animal in your clothing. And between Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei, they also expand this to any haram animal. So for example, a cat. Because cats and rabbits these would be haram for us to consume. For this ruling, unlike the third condition where we said that if it's a part of the body that does not have sense, it's okay, and we gave the example of the fur of the sheep and all that stuff, for this example, it does create a problem. So any part of the body of a predator or a haram animal, an animal that we are not allowed to consume its meat, that is going to create a problem for our salat. So, for example, one of the questions that came up before that we had from one of the brothers that was in Canada was if I have a coat, for example, that's made of the fur of coyotes, can I wear that when I'm praying salat? And the answer is no, because a coyote is a predator, and having that as part of your clothing when you are reciting salat is going to be a problem. Okay. That was condition number 4. Condition number 5 and 6 were very basic, simple conditions. We're not going to spend time on them. It was that you should not, as a man, you cannot have pure silk as part of your clothing, and that you should not be wearing gold, whether it be in your clothing or it be like part of the accessories that you're having on. This will create a problem with regards to your salat. And the last thing that we mentioned was the mustahabbat and makruhat. I'm not going to repeat those again, but one thing that I do want to make clear is that a clothing that has a picture on it, it will not create a problem for your salat. It is simply makruh. This is mentioned as one of the makruhat in salat. So it won't create a problem with regards to your salat. It is simply makruh. And today, inshallah, we'll go more into some of the mustahabbat and the makruhat that we have with regards to the place in which we pray. And this idea of, having a picture in the room or praying in front of a picture, that will come up, and we will discuss that today, inshallah. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because that's one of the questions that I've been asked very often, that if I'm praying in a room that has a picture, what am I supposed to do? Can I even pray there? Can I not pray there? What if it's like some, weird picture, basically a picture that's may not be as holy as we have around our houses normally, right? So we'll discuss that inshallah. All right, let me take a quick look, see if we have any questions with regards to last session. Okay, no questions. So inshallah, I'm gonna dive right into today's topic, and we will take it from there. Okay. So moving on now from the clothing that someone is supposed to pray to the place in which someone is supposed to pray, right? To give you a quick overview, we have 6 conditions here. 6 conditions that have to do with the place in which someone is going to be offering their prayer. Okay, so let's start from number 1. Number 1 is that it can't be ghasbi, similar to your clothing, right? And when they say it can't be ghasbi, they mean the house that you're praying in, like, the basically the floor that you're standing on, that can't be ghasbi, and also the whatever rug or carpet you're using to pray on, right? Anything that you would be standing on, that should not be ghasbi. So again, I am not going to go into too much detail in this regard when it comes to something not being ghasbi, although there are some questions that come up here actually that are very I have here in my notes that are very common questions. But I will say this. First question that we have to answer, first issue we have to address is, what if the house I'm praying in, I didn't pay khums on? Now, you know that usually the house that you bought, because you're using it, technically if you're praying in it, that usually means you're using it for your day-to-day needs, then technically you won't have to pay khums on this. If you bought the house with that money before your khums date came, if you saved up and things of that nature, a discussion will come on that inshallah later on. Maybe one day when we get to discuss the rulings on khums, and Mizan Institute actually has a course prepared for that. So inshallah, if we have that, anyone is interested, we can look into that. But basically, if this is a house, let's just say you didn't pay khums on it, right? Now you're praying in it. What is the ruling? Similar to the clothing that we mentioned. So technically, 99% of the time, you do not have to redo your prayers, except if when you were buying the house, you told the person that you were buying the house from that I'm going to buy your house with this money. And that money was money that you had not paid khumsan, which technically never happens. You never point to a certain amount of money and say, I'm going to pay with this amount of money. No, you just go there. You say, hey, I want the house. I'll pay with some money. And later on you go home and you say, okay, I'll pay with this money, right? And that money happens to be a money that you haven't paid khumsan. That's how it usually goes. So you do not have to necessarily redo your prayers if the house that you were offering your salat in, you did not pay khumsan. That's the first ruling. Now, the question that comes up here is about situations where I don't know if I'm allowed to pray in a particular land, right? So, and I've had this question before where people say, for example, like you're traveling in North America, there aren't masjids every other exit, obviously. So like you end up praying in different places, random places sometimes, right? Are you allowed to pray in these different places? Okay, a couple principles here. If we learn these couple of principles, it will really help us out. Okay, so both Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei say that if you want to pray somewhere, you have to make sure that the owner of that place is okay with you praying over there. Okay. However, they add this. They say, hey, when we say that you have to make sure that he's okay, it doesn't mean that like he literally has to say I'm okay with it. No, if he does something where you can tell and you can be confident that, yeah, he's okay with me praying here, then you can pray there. A lot of times I've seen people, they make distinctions between private ownership and public ownership and things like that. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Of course, if it's public areas, of course you can pray there. If it's a rest area on the way, of course you can pray there, no doubt about that. But even when it comes to private, businesses, basically on the roads, for example, of course you can pray there. If somehow you know that business, the owner of that business, doesn't care, right? So, for example, if this is like a chain business, right, not like a business that's owned by a couple people. No, it's a chain business, right, and it has like 20 different branches, and they have like it's a huge place. And they have people coming and going, like a gas station, for example, or for example, the other stores that we have, on our exits. Of course, in America, you find probably too many of them, basically. But because, like, for example, just for myself, when I go to these places, I can be pretty sure that, no, of course, the owner here doesn't care if I pray here. Of course they wouldn't have a problem with it, especially if I'm like buying something from that store, from that convenience store. They would be fine with it. They wouldn't care. Yes, if it's a serious doubt that you have where you're like, I'm really not sure if they're okay with me praying here, then yes, you would not be able to pray there because it's a privately owned place. So they say you have to make sure that they're okay with it. But when they say you have to make sure, they don't mean that you have to go and ask. No, they just say, hey, if that person has done something, or you're just confident that, yes, the guy is okay with me praying here, then you can go ahead and do that, right? Moving on, praying in large lands, right? In very large lands, right? Like, for example, if you're traveling from one city to another city, a lot of times you'll go between the two cities, there's huge pieces of land, right? And these are pieces of land that don't really have any barriers. They don't have gates or anything like that. Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei say, hey, you can pray there. There's no problem. So like if you have to pull over in the middle of nowhere and you have to pray, then no problem. You don't have to ask anyone if you can find anyone even. And praying in smaller places that don't have walls, Ayatollah Sistani says that it's okay for you to simply pray there. So these are a couple principles that help us out when it comes to this whole ghasbi thing. Hopefully that clarifies with regards to the ruling there. Okay. Let me check, see if we have any questions. Okay, no questions. So we'll continue, inshallah. This is condition number 1. Condition number 2, part gets really, really practical. Condition number 2 is that the place that you are praying and please pay attention to my wording because the wording is very important here. The place that you're praying, it should not be unstable. Okay, usually the way we explain this ruling is that the place that you are praying should not be moving. And that is a wrong, well, I shouldn't say wrong, but it's an inaccurate statement, okay? Because it is okay, according to Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei, to pray in a place or a thing that is moving. The issue comes up when you are praying in that thing that is moving, if it is unstable. So for example, let's say you're praying on a boat. This boat is a smaller boat. While you're in the boat, it's moving around, right? It's hitting waves, for example. You're going up and down. Yeah, that's an issue. But let's say you're praying on a cruise. Okay, if you're praying on a cruise, of course, like it's not like the ship is jumping up and down. It's stable, right? So the idea is not whether it is moving or not. That's not a problem. The problem is when the, whatever it is that you're praying on is unstable in such a way where your body is not calm. It's moving up, it's moving down, right? So technically, there is no problem with praying on a plane, even if you have time after the flight to pray outside and pray in the airport. Still, you don't have to do that if you can pray in the plane and the plane is, at a time in your flight where the plane is stable, because most planes, right, they would be stable. Yes, if it's like a 2-person plane, then yes, it would be unstable. So yes, similarly, if I want to pray alongside this ruling, another point that comes in is if I want to pray on a bed, for example, or sometimes you want to pray in a place where it's a little shaky. If you stand in that place and it sinks in, but it stops at a certain point and your body is stable, you can pray there. There's no problem. So it's not about moving or not moving. It's about whether it is stable or unstable. Allow me to read this ruling from Minhaj al-Salihin because this is a ruling that might be a little new for some of us. So allow me to just read. So he says, يعتبر, this is ruling 559, يعتبر في مكان الصلاة الفريضة أن يكون بحيث يستقر فيه المصلي ولا يضطرب. So like he has to be stable. He should not be moving around, and like his body should not be shifting from one side to another side, basically. على نحو لا يتمكن من القيام أو الركوع أو السجود. And then he continues, وتجوز على الدابة والسفينة الواقفتين مع حصول الاستقرار على النحو المتقدم وكذا إذا كانتا صائرتين. So he says, hey, if you're in a ship and this ship is moving, it's fine. If إن حصل ذلك أيضا, if your body is stable. ونحوهما السيارة والقطار وأمثالهما. And similarly, being in a car, or let's say in an RV, for example, would be an example for this, right? Or on the train or whatever. So it's not about whether it's moving or not. It's about whether it is stable or not. Okay, so before I move on, a couple questions. Sister Safinas is asking, what if the land has a for sale signs board? Yes, so if the land has anything that would sort of, basically what I understood from this ruling is that if the land has any type of sign that is telling you that this is private ownership, it has walls, it has things of that nature, then that is something that you have to know that that person is okay with you praying there. But again, I want to emphasize, even when we say that you have to know he's okay with it, we don't mean like know 100%. No, we mean that if the person found out that you prayed, and especially not in the middle of his land, right? Like right where, like, by the sidewalk, for example, but on his land, is he going to care about that? No, he's not going to care about that. When was the last time, you had someone come? Yes, if you're going to go into the middle of his land and pray over there, right? Yeah, that's that's probably gonna be, well, at least you'd say, hey, I don't know, maybe he's gonna have an issue with it, right? So hopefully we answered that question, Sister Safinas. Brother Dawood is asking, what if you're on a plane and it's time to pray? Yes, so if you're on a plane and it's time to pray, if you can pray in a normal fashion, and I'll explain this a little bit more as we move forward, but if you can pray in a normal fashion, in the sense that you can do your ruku normally, you can do your sujud normally. Basically, if they're allowing you to stand up and pray, And the plane is at a point in the flight where it's stable. It's not like if you stand up, you'll be, go shifting around from one side to the other side. You can pray in the plane. There's no problem there. Now, we'll talk more about situations where they don't allow you to stand up. We're going to discuss that. That's where things get a little detailed. So we'll discuss that in just a second. Another question that we have, what if the place you work at is not tahir? Should we postpone salat or pray where is dry? A very good question. I'm going to get to that in just a second. We will answer that. That is one of the rulings that is very much misunderstood in our Muslim communities. I'll explain that in just a second. Sis Samira is asking, Salam Shaykh, wa alaikum salam. What happens if the airplane suddenly experiences turbulence while you're praying in that plane? You see, if you're praying and the airplane all of a sudden has turbulence, we have to discuss this in two senses. First of all is your safety, okay? Now, and it depends on your judgment, honestly. If the turbulence is serious turbulence, where you're really worried about your safety, right? You would have to leave your namaz and go sit down, okay? And that's not haram or anything. You go and you sit down, your safety is your number one priority, right? If what you mean is not that, it's not like a safety issue, no, if it's having turbulence in the sense that your body is no longer calm and it's shifting around and you're going from one step to another step and stuff like that, then yes, that would be an issue in the sense that you would not be able to say any of your adhkar. You would have to wait until the airplane calms down and then you would continue with your prayer, right? And if it's serious turbulence where like you move left to right in such a way where the form and shape of your prayer is ruined, then your namaz has become batil whether you like it or not. So depending on what level of turbulence it is, that would be the answer to the question. Hopefully that answered the question. Salamun alaikum. Another question. Wa alaikum salam. Not sure if you mentioned this, but what about the direction of the moving vehicle if it is stable? Yes, very good point. So it is understood that when we say that the vehicle that you're in, be it a ship or a plane or whatever, when we say it's stable and because it's stable you can pray there, this is all having in mind that the qibla is not going to change. If the qibla does change, like if the vehicle does change directions, you would stop your qira'at, you would stop whatever it is you're doing, fix your qibla, and then you would continue with your salat. So that would be the ruling there. So like when it comes to like RVs, if you're praying in RVs or trains even, it would be quite difficult. If you're talking about planes or ships, not really, because they don't really change direction that often. But that's what you would do in that situation. Brother Arshad is asking, Salam wa alaikum salam. Nice to have you with us, Brother Arshad. How to consider the prayer timings on plane as plane is moving to different time zones? Good question. So we discussed this when we were talking about the timings of prayer. So I'll just mention the answer very quickly. You are going to consider the timings of prayer based on wherever you are. So if you are flying against the movement of the sun, then you will have to pray your salat a little bit quicker than you normally do. If you are flying in alongside the movement of the sun, then you would have more time to pray. Okay, so that's a simple answer to your question. Again, we discussed that when we were talking about the timings of prayer. I think it was the first session that we had, either the first or the second session. You can look up over there and we have a more detailed answer over there. Okay, let me move on with the conditions. So we mentioned that, yes. Okay, condition number 3 is that wherever it is that you're praying, it has to be a place where you are able to get up and do your ruku and do your qiyam and do your sujood, right? So like the examples they give in the books of fiqh is that if you're going to pray in a place where the ceiling is so short that you can't even get up and do a proper qiyam, you can't pray there, right? So that's the example they give. The example that we probably deal with a lot more often is, again, when you are praying on the plane, but not in the sense of whether it's stable or it's unstable, in the sense that they're not allowing me to get up. And if you want to know specifically what I'm talking about, I'm specifically talking about Qatar Airways that doesn't allow you to get up and pray, right? which blows my mind. Knowing that a lot of the people who are on those flights are Muslim, actually. Some other airlines like Emirates does allow you to do that, as far as I know. But anyways, so if you're not allowed to get up and pray, would that be an issue? So like, let's say you're on the plane, the time of namaz has come. If they're not allowing you to get up and you really just can't get up and pray, right? Or let's say, for example, there's turbulence, right? And because of that, because of your own safety, you're not going to get up. Then if there is time for you to wait to get to the airport and pray, then you would have to do that. If not, then yes, you would have to sit down and pray, while sitting down. When you are praying sitting down, and I don't want to go into too much detail about this, but when you're praying sitting down, whatever part of your salat that you can do in a normal way, you have to do that part in a normal way. The rest of it, you would have to do sitting down. So for example, I'm just going to mention this one example now, move on. If you can get up and say your takbiratul ihram, you would have to do that, right? Even if you can get up where you're sitting, right? You can get up and stand up for a second and say Allahu Akbar. Maybe you can do the qira'at while you're standing up. But when it comes to ruku, for example, then you would have to do ruku sitting down, right? Like do a half bowing down type of thing, right? So I just want to mention this point, that if you're praying in a sitting down position, you have to do as much of the prayer, as much of the different parts of the prayer in the normal way as you can, okay? Yes, the parts that you can't, and you do those sitting down. So when we talk about praying in the plane, we are talking about it from two different perspectives. We are talking about it in terms of whether it's stable or not. That's one question. And then the second question is, if it's stable, will they allow me to pray while standing up or while sitting down? Okay. I think we've run into some issues here. Okay, so I think we're back. Hopefully we're back. Yes, okay. I don't know why we had some issues with the broadcast. Okay, I think we're back. Okay. So moving on. Like I said, when we're talking about planes, we're talking about it from two different perspectives. Okay. Condition number 4, and this is the one that this I can't remember if it was a brother or sister was asking, but someone brought this up. If I am praying in a place, does that place have to be tahir? This is a very, very commonly misunderstood ruling amongst our brothers and sisters. Brothers and sisters, hopefully what I mention is not going to surprise you too much. I'm having some issues. You'll forgive me for just a second. Just have to figure out why the broadcast is having some issues, because I need to see your comments as I go along. Okay, there we go. Yes, okay. This is one of those very commonly misunderstood rulings in our communities. Brothers and sisters, according to Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei, the place that you are praying, technically that does not have to be tahir. Yes, if it is najis and it is wet in such a way that it will make your clothing najis or your body najis, yes, you cannot pray there. But if it is dry, you can pray there. The only part that has to be tahir when you are praying your salat is where you put your forehead. And when we say where you put your forehead, we're not talking about the carpet. That's not where you put your forehead. We're talking about basically the turba, which is technically never najis, right? Other than that, even if I am praying in a place that has become najis, okay, if it's dry, there is no problem whatsoever for me to pray in that place. And I remember I put the ruling down to read the ruling because I know that this might be a little surprising for some of us, just because we may have had a different understanding of this, right? So this is ruling 549. you will see that nowhere does he talk about, Ayatollah Sistani talk about, or Ayatollah Khamenei even, talk about taharat of the place you're praying. The only time they talk about this is this. يُعْتَبَرُ فِي مَسْجِدِ الْجَبْهَةِ مُضَافًا إِلَى مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنَ الطَّهَارَةِ. So the places that you're putting your jabha, basically your turba, that has to be tahir. Okay? The other parts does not have to be tahir. Why is this important? Oh, if you have a child in the house, you already know why this is important. If you have a child in the house, I don't need to explain why this is important. This is important because it makes life so much easier. There's a lot of situations. You have a younger child in the house. You don't know if something happened here, right? So if an incident happened here or not, right? Or, for example, it's a house that you just moved into. You don't know who used to be there before, right? You don't know if it was, someone from Ahlul Kitab, or it was someone who was not from Ahlul Kitab, or whatever the case may be. Basically, this is not a condition. So hopefully we answered that question that we had before. What if the place you work at is not tahir? Should we postpone salat or pray where it's dry? Yes, you would have to pray in a place that is either dry or it's tahir. Either one of those would work. If it's najis and it's dry, no problem. You can definitely pray there. Yes, so like the only time that you will have a little bit of an issue is if, for example, you're praying out like on the road, right? And on the road, you're going to do sajda on like some grass. And I don't know, you see, for example, a waste of animal, like, on the grass. Yes, okay. Well, but no one's going to put their head on that anyway. So, again, this ruling that where you put your head has to be tahir or your forehead has to be tahir is something that, it's understood and it's quite obvious for many of us. Okay. Let me check to see if we have any other questions that come up in this regard. Okay, no questions. We will continue. Okay, moving on to condition number 5. Condition number 5 is, again, one of those things that's very commonly mistaken. Can a man and a woman pray while standing right beside one another? That's the question, right? And this question mainly comes up, brothers and sisters, when we're talking about them praying furada. Jamaat is usually a different thing. Usually there's a barrier between them. It's not so much of a question. But when it comes to them praying furada, what is the ruling here? Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei's ruling here are very different from one another, right? So let's start with Ayatollah Sistani's ruling. Ayatollah Sistani says, yes, if a brother and sister are praying, right? And I'm saying when they're praying furada, if they are praying furada, the sister should be a little bit behind the brother. So where she puts her turba should not be further than the knees of the brother. Based on this, that means that the sister cannot pray in front of him either. So it should either be at that level or behind it. Why? We really don't know the reason behind the ruling. This is just the ruling Ayatollah Sistani has. Of course, it's coming from a hadith. He says, so that's the ruling, unless there's two situations where that's fine. The sister can pray beside a brother or ahead of them. Number one, if there is a barrier between them, right? They can do that, no problem. Number two, if the distance between them is more than 4.5 meters, right? If it's more than 4.5 meters away, then that is okay. I actually did the calculation to see how many feet that would be, but for some reason I didn't put it in my notes. So if anyone can do that calculation and let us know in the comments, that'd be awesome. So, but it's a significant distance. Okay, so that's Ayatollah Sistani's ruling. And he makes it very clear that when we talk about this, there's no difference between the two situations where the brother and sister are mahram or they're non-mahram. That does not make a difference in the ruling. Okay. Ayatollah, well, let me just read off of this real quickly, because I want to show that Ayatollah Sistani has clearly said that there's no difference between whether these people are mahram, non-mahram, whether they're husband, wife. This ruling applies, right? This is ruling 545 لا تصح على الأحوة لزوما. He says that according to obligatory precaution, they should not be praying close to one another or beside one another, or the women being ahead. And then he moves down a couple lines and he says ولا فرق في ذلك بين المحارم وغيرهم والزوج والزوجة وغيرهما. Right? Says doesn't matter if these two people are mahram, they're married to one another, doesn't matter. Ayatollah Khamenei's ruling on this is starkly different. What does he say? He says no, the only thing that is important is that the distance between the brother and the sister has to be the size of a palm. If there's that much distance between them, the sister can pray in front, she can pray in the back, she can pray beside him, as long as there's that much distance between them. That's Ayatollah Khamenei's ruling. So on Ayatollah Khamenei's website, when you go to his Arabic website, you will find this: هل صحيح أن الرجال يجب أن يكونوا أمام النساء في أثناء الصلاة؟ الجواب لا مانع من محاذاة المرأة للرجل أو تقدمها عليه. She can stand in front of him, in fact, فيما إذا كان بينهما الفصل بمقدار شبر على الأحوات, as long as there is the amount of a palm of a distance between them. So technically, it's not a problem for Ayatollah, basically Ayatollah Khamenei. 14 feet. Brother Akbar is saying that the 4.5 meters would be 14 feet. Yes. So Ayatollah Sistani says, hey, if there's a barrier between them, if they are 14 feet away from one another, or even if technically from the common view, people will consider them in two different rooms, two different areas, then that is also fine as well. Other than that, then that's a problem. Yes, Ayatollah Sistani fatwa, as we mentioned when we were reading the ruling, is ihtiyat wajib. So that's a very good point. So in fact, Ayatollah Khamenei's is also an ihtiyat wajib. So in this regard, we can refer to Ayatollah Khamenei. If someone sees him as the next most knowledgeable, they can refer to him in this regard. Okay, we have one question from Brother Dawood. Salam Shaykh, wa alaikum assalam. I'm new to Shiism. Welcome. What if I don't own a turba yet? Can I use a rock? Yes, you can absolutely use a rock for that. Brother Bilal is asking, Shaykh, can you explain what if this ruling by Ayatollah Sistani is ihtiyat wajib? When can you defer to Ayatollah Khamenei's ruling? It can't just be for convenience. No, it can actually be for convenience, because ihtiyat wajib, very simply explained, ihtiyat wajib means a marja has not reached a specific conclusion with regard to this ruling. So what the marja does is he says, in this regard, I'm not going to give a fatwa. I'm going to say, if you want to take my opinion, you should do ihtiyat, because I'm not sure. But because I am not sure, you can refer to the next person who does have an opinion, who has reached a conclusion in this regard. So either take ihtiyat and take the harder way based on me because I didn't reach a conclusion, or you can move on to the next person. You can absolutely do it because of convenience. There's no problem there. This is if your marja is saying ihtiyat wajib. Not when your marja is giving a fatwa. That's a completely different discussion. When your marja is giving a fatwa, your marja is saying, I'm sure about this. So then technically you would have to, stick to your marja for the most part. Okay. Moving on, we have one more condition to mention, and inshallah, we will end after that. The sixth and final condition is that the place that someone is praying, it has to be even, roughly speaking. So what do I mean? The place that someone is praying, the places where he is going to put his, like specifically in sujood, where he is going to put his forehead and his hands, or his palms, I should say, and the two big toes and the knees, right? These 7 different parts of the body. These should be relatively even, okay? But if there is a difference of 4 stacked up fingers, or I should say less than this much of a difference of height between them, then it's okay. And that's technically what normally happens. If there's more than that, yes, they would have an issue in that regard. So that's that ruling. So like if you go to the mountains and you're praying If it's less than 4 stacked up fingers, which it normally is, that's not going to be a problem. If you're praying on a hill, same thing would apply. It depends on what the angle of the hill is going to be. One last ruling I'll mention, because this was actually something that someone asked before, is praying in a place where haram music is being played. Ayatollah Sistani and Ayatollah Khamenei, although it's not good to pray in a place like that. So if you have another option, choose another option and go somewhere else. But does it invalidate your salat? No. Doesn't invalidate your salat. You should be praying as long as you're not paying attention to the music. I'm saying this because some people, the place they work and thus they pray is like music is being broadcasted, right? It happens sometimes. So no, it's not a problem. You just shouldn't listen to it, and that will not create a problem with regards to this person's salat. Okay. Just one more time checking. Okay, no question. So I'm going to mention just a couple mustahabbat and makruhat, and inshallah we'll bring today's session to an end. Some of the mustahabbat of the place in which you're praying. It's mustahab for you to pray in the masjid. It's mustahab for sisters to pray in a place where non-mahram would not see them, even if they have proper clothing. It's better for them to pray in a place where non-mahram would not see them. It's mustahab, of course. When I say mustahab, these are different levels of mustahab. Some of them are very recommended. Mustahab to pray in the shrines of the ma'sumin. It's interesting that when it comes to the shrines of the ma'sumin, certain things that sometimes we don't associate so much with being in the shrine of the ma'sumin is very much recommended. Reciting Quran in the shrines of the ma'sumin, very much recommended. Reciting, performing salat, very much recommended. It's more about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like when you look at some of the mustahabbat, you get the feeling that the ma'sumin are pointing to someone else. But anyways, it's just a point on the side. Makruhat, praying in a place where people are coming and going is makruh. If it's a place where you're blocking people's way, you're creating problems for other people, that is haram. You're not allowed to do that. We're talking about a situation where no, you're not creating problems for anyone. People are just coming and going. It's still makruh for you to pray there, right? Maybe because you can't pay as much attention. But the ruling is a general one. They just say if you're praying in a place where people are coming and going, it's makruh. The reason why I say this is because a lot of times you will find in the harams, for example, sometimes you will find, a lot of times in Muslim countries, sometimes you will find, even in our own centers, people will, because it gets crowded sometimes, they will pray anywhere. And then it becomes an issue because people want to come, they want to go. That if it's in a way where it's causing serious problems, it is haram. This was specifically mentioned in some of the istifta'at. Praying in front of or in the same room that you have a picture of a living being is makruh. So Ayatollah Sistani has actually mentioned these as two different things that are makruh. So it's like two levels of being makruh, basically. So what they do mention is that if you are in a room where there is a picture, then if you can cover it up, then you can just cover it up, basically. But it's not haram. You can pray even without covering up that picture. It is simply a makruh. And another one that Ayatollah Sistani has mentioned is praying in a graveyard, on the graves, or even between the graves. He considers that makruh as well. Okay, so we're done, alhamdulillah, with the conditions of prayer. Inshallah, when we continue in February and the flyer is being designed and it'll be sent out with the specific dates. I mean, for me specifically, it's going to be Tuesday, the Tuesdays throughout February. We will be moving on now to wudu and tayammum and ghusl and wudu jabira, which is a topic we touched on before and a lot of us may not know too much about. So those 4 topics are the topics that we will be discussing moving forward. I don't know if we'll cover all of it in February. I'm not sure, but those are the topics that we're going to be moving on to because we are technically done with the conditions of prayer. Although wudu or tayammum or ghusl, whatever we use for prayer, could technically also be considered a condition. But like from a fiqhi perspective, when they talk about conditions, they usually don't include the wudu and ghusl and tayammum. So anyways, doesn't matter. Whichever way you look at it, we're done with these conditions. Inshallah, in the sessions that we'll have moving forward, we will be discussing those rulings, inshallah. If you have not liked the Facebook page, you can go ahead and do that or follow it so that you can get the updates. Alhamdulillah, Mizan Institute held another course in Houston. Alhamdulillah, very good reception and quite a bit of participation there. And inshallah, Shaykh Amin will definitely update you guys with regards to that as well. And inshallah, tomorrow, Shaykh Amin will be with you guys with his topic that he has been discussing. Thank you very much. Inshallah, keep us in your du'as. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.